Freezing temperatures are here to stay for this season, so that means it's finally time to finish off all of our outdoor projects and chores. Today we're cutting back any of our grapes. We're also finishing off the last of our garden projects before the temperatures are just too cold to do anything. We're also taking care of our chickens in the chicken coops. The waterers are starting to freeze because it's just too cold, so we're getting those all cleaned up, refilled, and plugged in so they have fresh water through the winter without it freezing every night. The only project we have left in our garden is to pull out the last of the tomato plants. We've been putting it off because we've kind of had some interesting cold weather, but the tomatoes have still been thriving. But they have finally all died off, and we are ready to clean up these tomato trellises.
Today we're canning tomatoes. So some of my tomatoes are fresh from the garden, and some of them I've been saving up for several weeks just in the freezer. We bagged them up in these bags of about 5 to 8 pounds of tomatoes in each bag. And now we're ready to actually can some tomato sauce or pasta sauce. Maybe we do some pizza sauce. I don't know. We've got a few things on the menu today, but we have a ton of tomatoes and we're ready to get to work. So a couple of things when working with tomatoes. Tomatoes are very acidic, which means for the most part, if you're doing just a plain tomato with canning, you can use a water bath canner. But if you do want to do a pasta sauce where you include lots of vegetables or meat, then you need to use a pressure canner. So make sure as you're looking at recipes to find recipes that are genuine, that they know what they're talking about, because you don't want to put your family at risk by canning something that should have been pressure canned for the safety of your family. If you have doubts, you can always pressure can your tomatoes. I know in some areas the acidity has changed on the tomatoes, and so some of the historical canning methods have changed as well for when it comes to tomatoes. Most recipes now call for some lemon juice for your tomatoes, just to ensure they have the right amount of acidity. So make sure you follow those recipes. The recipe we're using today, we've used for a couple of years and we like it pretty well. It is a tomato sauce that includes some onions and some garlic, as well as some dried herbs, and it's really delicious. And it's versatile. We can use it just as tomato sauce. We can use it as a pasta sauce. We can make it into kind of a pizza sauce or whatever we need when we take it off of the shelf. So hopefully some of those tips helped, and we're gonna go ahead and get rolling.
To start our tomato sauce, I am going to be using a combination of fresh and frozen tomatoes. So we have these Roman tomatoes. These are the last of them from our tomato plants. They've been sitting around for a few days, maybe even a week. So we are washing them up and we are going to core them and plop them right into this big stock pot. Now, this is one of the easiest ways to make tomato sauce, and I'm going to be using my mill. And it works really nicely because I'm using a combination of fresh and frozen tomatoes. I'm going to put this stock pot onto the stovetop with these fresh tomatoes while I drain out my frozen tomatoes. That way, they actually start the cooking process, start to tenderize, and the skins kind of break up a little bit. Then I'm going to pull all of my frozen tomatoes. I pulled them out of the freezer a couple days ago, so they're thawed out, and I'm going to drain them just using this small little colander that I have. And then I'm plopping those tomatoes right into the pan with the others. Now, while those are starting to cook down, I'm going to take some of our onions from the garden as well as garlic from the garden this year. I have a huge harvest of both of these, which is wonderful. For my onions, just to make it faster, I am chopping them up and putting them in my food processor or blender. And then this will chop them down, which just makes it really, really fast for processing these tomatoes into this tomato sauce. Now, one trick when it comes to using onions, I keep all of the ends of my onions as well as my skins and put them in a freezer bag. And then I put this into the freezer. And every time I kill onions or have carrot leftovers or celery leftovers, they go in this bag. And then I use that bag for bone broth later on. Or chicken broth, beef broth, whatever kind of broth I'm going to make. So save those skins and those pieces of your onions. Next, I've got my garlic. I have about 12 cloves of garlic that I am peeling and then mincing up. So it's pretty easy. You just smash it and then you can just pull the skins right off your garlic. That just makes the process really a lot faster. If you do have, I do have like a garlic pressing tool, I guess you would call it, and it pushes the garlic out and then the skins come out. But for this process, it's just easier for me to peel them all, and it's just faster for doing this amount of garlic. So now I'm just plopping all of that onions, and you can also put your garlic in here and blending them up in my little food processor here. You're going to need about 6 cups of onions. So, that's quite a bit because we're using about 45 pounds of tomatoes to make these jars of tomato sauce. So it's a lot. It'll make about 7 quarts of pasta sauce or tomato sauce. So I've got my onions and I've got my garlic and I'm blending them up. Once I have all of my onions and garlic blended up so they're pretty fine, I'm going to measure that out. I'm going to need 6 cups of chopped onions and then 12 cloves of minced garlic. I'm putting all of those onions right into that stock pot with those tomatoes that I've already started cooking down. The fresh tomatoes as well as the frozen tomatoes. So it's 45 pounds of tomatoes along with the 6 cups of onions and 12 cloves of garlic. And I am just going to cook this. I don't have to cook it down. I'm just cooking it until it kind of starts to boil and those skins start to loosen up. Now, the reason I don't have to cook it down is because I am using my Weston tomato press and sauce maker. So this is the tomato press. It's really easy to assemble. There's several pieces to it, but it works amazing at pulling out all of the seeds, all of the skins, all of the big chunks of onions, and it kind of juices everything, if you will, and presses it, and takes out all the stuff that you aren't going to need for your tomato sauce. Now, this isn't just a tomato press. You can also use this for applesauce. You can use it to make juice. You can use it for salsa if you want like a fine salsa. You could use it to make baby foods or jams. So it is really versatile. Use this product, you put your tomatoes in the top bowl and then you gently press them through the press. Out the one side comes all the juice of the tomato, and out the opposite side comes all the pulp. So the skins, the seeds, the pieces of the onion that you don't want to necessarily have in your jar for water bath canning. So you can kind of see there on the left side all the pulp kind of going into that white bowl, and then in the front, the juice is going into the metal bowl. So it really is a quick way to get the juice of your tomatoes without having to use your blender to blend everything down and then strain everything out and try and get all the seeds. Or in some years, I haven't pulled the seeds out. So, it just makes the process really, really easy. It is a great investment for your homestead. And I will leave a link down in the description so you can check it out. Once all of your tomatoes have gone through the mill, you now have this bowl of sauce. This sauce is going to go back in the stock pot, and we're going to put it on the stove top. And this is our chance to add all of our flavors to it. So for this recipe, I am adding a tablespoon of black pepper, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, a quarter cup of sea salt, along with my herbs that I want. So whatever Italian herbs that you want to add, basil, thyme, rosemary, sage, whatever flavors your family likes for your pasta sauce or tomato sauce. You can leave out the herbs if you want. It's totally up to you. But once everything is added, stirred in, then you're going to cook the sauce down. You're going to cook it down at least to half of the height it is right now in your stock pot, if not 3/4 of the way down. You'll get a really watery sauce if you don't cook it down enough. How do I know? Because I've done it before. When you think it's at the right consistency, go just a little bit longer. You won't regret that. So you're going to cook it down. Then once it's cooked down, and only once it's cooked down enough, you can start ladling it to your jars. Now, because tomatoes have different acidity and they're not as acidic as they used to be in the past, it is important to add a little bit of lemon juice to each of your jars. For your pint jars, you want to put a tablespoon of lemon juice. For your quart jars, you're putting 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And I just put it right into the jar before ladling on the sauce. Now you can ladle your sauce right into your jars, right over that lemon juice. I just use a measuring cup instead of a ladle. I have a little bit more control over it. So I just put my funnel on my jars and then ladle the sauce into those jars. You're going to leave about a 1/2 inch headspace. This just allows enough room in the water bath canning process that the tomato sauce doesn't seep out through your jar lid. So give it a little bit of space. And then you can also use the edge of your wooden spoon or whatever to kind of take out some of those bubbles. You're probably not going to have a lot of bubbles because it's already a liquid, so there's not a lot of air in there. But always err on the side of caution when it comes to canning. once the sauce is in the jars, take a dry paper towel or a dry rag, wipe those lids really well, and then use a little bit of vinegar to wipe them again, all of those rims of the jars, to make sure there's no tomato sauce, no lemon juice, no sticky stuff, whatever, around the edges of those jars. And then you can add on your lids and your rims to each of your jars. Don't tighten them too tight. You're just tightening them about, fingertip tight. So if they're too tight, you run the risk of your jars cracking. Make sure you've had your water bath canner going. I always just turn it on because it takes a while for it to come to a boil. Get those jars right into your water bath canner and get them with at least an inch of water over each of the jars when you lower it into your water bath canner. So you want those jars covered, or else it's not getting the full heat all the way around the jars. So place your lid on it. And then for pints, you're processing for 35 minutes and quarts for 40 minutes. But that depends on your elevation. So make sure you know what you need to add based on your elevation. Now, this is my new tip this year. All of that pulp that came out the side of your tomato press, we are going to use that pulp to make ourselves some tomato paste powder. I know that sounds kind of weird. So to make this powder, we are putting the pulp onto our dehydrator trays. So I have 4 trays here. They can be the flat trays. They can be trays that have holes. It really doesn't matter. But I'm putting as much as the pulp as I can on each of these trays. And then I'm going to place them into my dehydrator. I'm going to dehydrate them for about 115 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 15 hours. I found the longer the better. You want it to be able to be crunchy when it comes out, so that when you put it into the blender, it becomes a powder. So if when you pull it out of the dehydrator, it still seems a little bit soft, more maybe like a fruit roll-up, then it's not done yet. You really want it to be nice and crunchy. So you can kind of see here, it's kind of a sheet of tomatoes after it's been dehydrated for several hours. But if you're lifting it and it still kind of sticks to the tray, then go ahead and put it in for a few more hours. You really do want it as crunchy as possible. Once it is nice and dry, you're going to put it into your blender and you are going to blend it down into a powder. Now, because it does have all the seeds, it's not going to become a perfect powder with the seeds. So you might need to strain out or sift out, I guess is a better word for it, the seeds. So put it through a sifter and let it sift out those seeds. But once you get that powder, you just put it in a jar, label it, and you have tomato paste powder you can use in soups and stews for years to come. We are so grateful for all our garden has given us this year on our homestead. It's very rewarding to know our pantry is full and our garden is at rest for the season. There's so much work and dedication that goes to making a homestead work, and we're grateful for each of you for watching and following along. We'll see you guys next time.